you feeling stuck, lost, tired, or uninspired? We've all been there, including myself. I'm Coach Des, mindset motivator and lifestyle entrepreneur. I'm here to tell you that the best, unapologetic, and limitless version of yourself is yet to come. The Born Unbreakable podcast is here to inspire just that. With motivating guests from all different walks of life and around the world, their stories will empower you to unlock abundance and your unbreakable spirit. Do you need accountability? Reach out to me for a free consultation of how I can support you in reaching your maximum potential. This episode is brought to you by Korma Date Coffee, the healthy alternative to coffee. This delicious date coffee has the health benefits of giving you natural energy, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Best of all, Korma is caffeine-free, no jitters, no anxiety, and no afternoon crash. Go to kormacafe.com, that's KORMACAFE.com, and enter discount code BORNUNBREAKABLE at checkout to get 10% off your order. Welcome to the Born Unbreakable podcast. It might be your first time here. You might be back over and over again. Either way, I'm glad you decided to show up today. And just, a public service announcement. I was telling my amazing guest, Rachel, that I've got the yard people doing some pretty lovely work. So they may make appearances throughout our conversation today to add a little spice, here today, because who doesn't need a little extra lawn, blowing and things of that nature. But I am thrilled today because I have Rachel Brenke with me, and we're going to have an amazing conversation about business, about pivoting and taking leaps of faith, and the different services that she offers. So we'll have a little bit of everything, but I'm going to take a moment to introduce Rachel. I won't steal all of her thunder. She actually has enough accolades that I could sit here for about 45 minutes and do that. That probably wouldn't be the most productive way to do this interview, but I'll give you a couple highlights. Rachel is a multifaceted entrepreneur. She's a business strategist. She is also an intellectual property attorney. Can we just pause for a second? That is probably one of the fanciest names of an expert that I've had on here. Intellectual property attorney. That's terrifying.
I'm just glad you didn't lead with that, because people would not be listening. You'd see the drop off of listeners as they're like,
what?
Yeah.
There could be people as we speak Googling what that actually means. What does an attorney do when they're doing that? Right?
Trademarks, copyrights for small business. Still boring. That's not any better. Well, boring for you guys, not necessarily for me. I love it.
Well, on top of that, it doesn't sound like the easiest job in the world. Mm-hmm. You've written 7 books. Hey, I just, in my spare time that I write 7 books. She's hosted a top-rated podcast. So I've got a fellow podcaster, which is always near and dear to my heart. It's called the Real Biz Talk Podcast. If you actually go to her website, which I'll make sure is in the show notes, you can check that out. And she's gone through her fair share of challenges. Mm-hmm. Cancer has showed up in your life. You've taken some leaps of faith to do very different things, jumping from corporate America to doing the online business space, to helping others do things in the business space. So you've jumped all over with that, and you've been quite successful with that. And today you do one-on-one coaching. Mm-hmm. You have a mastermind that you do, which we'll get into what that actually means, because some people might go like, what is that? I don't even know what that stands for. Now you're talking about intellectual property and you're talking about mastermind. I didn't know I was going to need Google for this entire episode. You won't. I promise it will be.
It'll be way more fun than it sounds. I promise.
And you do, provide legal services.
I do.
So thank you for being here, because with a person that does that much stuff, for you to take time out to talk to me on my show says a lot about
Well, we were just talking pre-show. This is actually a really nice welcome interruption to the day. I love doing stuff like this. And when we're recording this and when this is going to air is so timely because we are 2 years-ish into the pandemic. The online space is what it is. And so I love talking about it. And I feel like it's way more received now than it was pre-pandemic because so many people can relate. And so wherever you're at, if you're in corporate America or you're trying to build a business, I think that you'll get some good stuff out of this episode.
Yeah. Well, and let's, and maybe it's just, let's talk about the climate that we're in for a second when we say the online space, right? So we all know Mr. Bezos and Amazon. If we are not familiar with who that is and what he does, we are all today, right? We are consumers of this space. I would love to do some sort of statistical study of how many people, what percentage of your holiday gifts came from Amazon. Right? So e-commerce is a thing. How many people today, as a result of the pandemic that we're in, are using Instacart, are using Grubhub, Uber Eats? I mean, you're getting your groceries delivered to you. You're getting your products delivered to you at your doorstep. You're getting your food delivered to you. So we are in a space of extreme convenience, for us to be doing this, but it's also extremely opportunistic, whether you are a small business or a big one, to be killing it right now, quite frankly. If we're talking about whether you're somebody who makes bracelets and started a side hustle, or t-shirts, and you're, just getting out there, starting to put your stuff out there, or you've been a curated business for years and now you're starting to boom even more because of the market space that we're in. This, this is opportunity.
Yeah.
At our doorstep.
It was a good silver lining out of the pandemic. Obviously, there was a lot of destruction, physical, mental, emotional, financial for a lot of people, but working with small businesses, and you hit the two things that I would have said, is the conveniences that we have. There's stuff like the Instacart, DoorDash, all of that I wish I had when I was first building my businesses and being a busy working mom, that I'm really glad that we have that now. But then even more so is the opportunity and how that opportunity is more readily accepted. For so long in society, I feel like, at least I did, I grew up with this idea of you go to school, you either graduate and you go to university, or you get you go work, you start working. Like those are your two paths. It wasn't really this idea of entrepreneurship, especially in the online space. Like, you do what on the internet? My mom still sometimes asks me when I'm going to get a job.
You do what? Yeah. From home?
Because it's
on
just
the internet?
foreign to some people, but it's been better in the last 2 years because so many have been thrust either by choice because they needed to be home with kids, or just something happened with their career. They were thrust into this, and it's been an exciting time. I mean, I say that, caringly, still recognizing, respecting everything else that's been going on.
We still are in the pandemic. So we're not even talking about it in the past tense, but then there's consumer trust, right? So there's the whole well, I don't know, I don't want to put my information online and all of this, but now there's Cash App and Venmo and Stripe and PayPal and automation and safety measures and different things where people they click one button, you got your Apple Pay or your whatever it is, and you don't even need to transact in person with people.
You don't even need to transact at all. I mean, online, it's just loading a website, you're being tracked. It's funny you say that because I think of, like my mom and other individuals who didn't really understand the online space pre-pandemic or even now, with the idea of, I don't want to give my information. Okay, but when you were going to Kohl's and to Target and those places and signing up for rewards programs, what do you think they were actually doing? These companies could care less about rewarding you for anything. They're tracking and mining your behavior patterns. So if you just think about, that's been how many years, mostly confined to major corporations. Now it's completely accessible online and for all of us. And there's so many tools, which I think is amazing because I didn't have that when I first started out.
Are you kidding me? Because Instagram and Facebook and all this stuff, they algorithm the heck out of me. I can't tell you how many beauty products I've purchased because they know my patterns. I'm like, oh, I need that. You're right. You are right.
But the good thing for us is it's not There's not a barrier between, us as small business. If we're getting into that, it's available at our fingertips to have access to the same information that Bezos and, other large corporations have.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely, want to talk to you about the kinds of problems that you solve in the work that you do. But before I do that, I have to acknowledge something about your story that I've noticed in a theme. I mean, you've done so many things. If anybody goes to Rachel's website, you'll see that she, you did battle cancer. You've done an Ironman. I mean, there's things that you've done that are on people's bucket lists. In terms of even business. So the theme that I noticed about what you do is you've taken leaps of faith, and you have pivoted at multiple stages of your life and career. Both, I mean, they're all intertwined, right? I mean, what has given you the confidence and the resiliency to do that at all these different junctures?
This is probably not going to be the best answer. I don't think that there's necessarily anything specific. It's just looking at a circumstance, whatever it is in your life, and recognizing it's make or break. You can sink or swim. Like, you're either going to figure it out, or what's the alternative? What are you losing in the process? For example, like, I really got thrust into the online space and entrepreneurship during the cancer. I kind of always knew I wanted to do it. I've struggled back and forth between following the corporate America track and this, but it was almost like I had to be around. We only had one kid at the time. We have 5 now. And I needed to be around for him. Husband was in and out deployed, and someone had to care for him. Someone had to care for me. I had to go to treatments and that sort of stuff. So just looking in the confines of it, it was, okay, I could sit around and feel sorry for myself having cancer, didn't know if I was going to be okay or not after it, didn't know what it looked like. I just knew that I wanted to achieve. You said a little bit ago that business and life are really intertwined, and I'm the same way. I kind of always teach from a place of, build or create your real business that you want to support the real life that you want to live. And so looking at that, though, it's kind of having these boundaries of the circumstances of that whole sink or swim moment. It was, I want to achieve being able to be around for my son and deal with my cancer. So how am I going to do that within the confines of what I had? And that's where I started really getting into online space. And I didn't, like I said before, I didn't nearly have the platforms and accessibility that we have now. But yeah, that's not really a good, shiny, glittery answer, but I think it's something that's real. All of us have circumstances, and it's hard when you listen to stories. You may not relate with me because you're like, well, I never had cancer. I don't know what that's like. No, but you may have lost a job. You may be unhappy in a position that you're in. You may have had to move. You may have had to care for, some family member. We all have something in our life that sets boundaries. And it's going to sound so like fortune cookie cliche, but it really honestly is what you do within that and choosing to do that. And so like when you mentioned like the pivoting, oftentimes it wasn't that I just had the confidence and desired to do it. I sometimes had no choice, and I'm okay with that. I'm thankful for that now. Maybe not so much at the time.
Yeah, but you made that choice, whether it felt confident or not at the time. Yeah. The attitude that you chose was to persevere and to move forward. So take me back to when you were first getting. So you're dealing with cancer. You've got adjustment to the home life, which, life previous to that was different, chaotic. You were doing other stuff in the corporate land. You're a mom. You got that going on. So this is the environment that you're in. So then you're like, online, that's interesting. What were you trying to figure out at that time, minus all the things we know today?
Honestly, just how to financially support my family and how I could contribute without having to go outside the home, be away from my son, be away from treatments, and how I can make money, because at the time we didn't have a lot. We still, I grew up a pretty privileged life, but when I married my husband, he was junior enlisted in the military. I was doing all of this, so I couldn't have a consistent employment and didn't really want it, frankly, because I wanted to have a flexibility. So for me, the driver was financial. And for a lot of people, especially right now when we're recording this, that is why a lot of people have, they've always kind of had that little feeling of getting on the online space. But for me, the biggest one was, I know that one day I want to do this. I just don't know what it looks like. I don't know if it even can be done. And let me kind of set the stage of when all of this that we're talking about blogging at the time was just getting into being monetized. It really was a bit more about personal blogging. You didn't have really affiliate links. Instagram didn't exist. Actually, Facebook didn't exist. I was on MySpace. Oh my God, MySpace.
Girl, you too? I had one of those.
Is it still up?
I added music. I don't even know. We should check after this. And you could do music. So
In
when
the
you remember
glitter,
that,
the little
you could
glitter.
do that. You could have a theme song. So when someone came to your page, it was, I thought that was cool.
That's
It's so people are listening right now that probably don't even know what that is.
Google it.
Let's
I'm
be
sure there's
honest.
YouTube videos that could show it, or I'll find mine and we can share it. But before we got on recording, we were talking about what we were doing today. Well, I spent the morning working on the website, HTML coding things. Where do you think I learned that? From MySpace, getting that auto player music and putting the glittery
Ah,
streams in the back of the profile.
see,
So it all
there
works.
was
It's
a
all
use
built.
for that.
There was. I didn't know it at the time. I just thought I was being cool. But it's so funny because my husband, he's big into computers and coding. He's like, that's not real coding. I'm like, don't burst my bubble. I love it. I love it. No, but yeah. So at the time, though, we didn't have freemium information. Podcasting really wasn't a thing. Pinterest definitely wasn't. So we had next to no information. So I didn't really have, and this is probably really bad as like a business coach, I didn't have like this vision of exactly what I wanted my online business to look like. I just knew a couple of things. I needed to financially support my family and contribute. I knew that I wanted to be flexible, create the real business, to live your real life, and that it was going to be mine, that I was going to fill my pockets and my goals and my dreams. So those are really the three big things. And they haven't changed much since then. My businesses have changed, my visions have changed, but those three key elements have really just stuck around through all of them.
I love that. I love the consistency,
Mm-hmm.
because even though things around us have changed technologically, you have the same sound core values
Mm-hmm.
that drive you in
Yeah.
your business, whether we're talking about years ago or we're talking about the present. Okay, so you mastered that for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What then led you to want to help other people and building their businesses?
Again, timing. I didn't even know what a business coach was. At the time, it was before business. I was a business coach before business coaching was cool, right? You find a plethora online. There's some really good ones. There's some not so good ones out there too. But I was having people ask me questions. They were seeing what I was doing. I had like an online apparel store, was doing graphic design stuff. Oh, the designs were horrible. I was trying to figure out my skills, okay? Between MySpace and really crappy graphic design. I was trying to, those are not my skills, obviously. But no, a lot of people started asking me questions. And when I started making money and being able to have like the three core values we just talked about, that I hadn't fully achieved really what I wanted, but friends were starting to see what I was accomplishing with that. They would start asking me business questions. So that's actually why I started blogging. Was I wanted to be not so much that I wanted to have a blog to drive people to at the time. Wasn't really considering it being a resource. It was kind of foreign. It was honestly to save time. And I was kind of tired of writing out the same messages to everyone. So someone would ask a question, I would put it into a blog post, send it out. And then people would say, oh, I want more help. Can you just sit and talk with me? Can we do coffee? And it kind of evolved from there. As I've done brick and mortar, I've done physical products, I've done digital products, services, kind of the gamut of it. And so, yeah, that's just evolved from there. And even though I keep doing other things, my business coaching and strategy stuff is kind of more internal. I don't really forward front be like, that's my main service. Running my other businesses and actually doing the practice of business is priority. And then everything after that is helping others versus, there's a lot of coaches out there who've never really run a business before that are trying to teach you how to run a business. And I want to practice what I preach. So, the business coaching is secondary to everything else I do. But doesn't mean I don't love it. Actually, I probably love it more than the other things I do. But yeah.
Well, and that makes for really dynamic days. I can't imagine that your days are the same all the time.
It takes scheduling for sure.
Yeah. All the different businesses, thinking about the needs, and then also thinking of when you prioritize who you want to help. I mean, I feel like, listening to you, prioritization is probably something that you spent some time mastering.
Well, it's a tough thing too, because if you ask me, out of all the things you do, what's your favorite? It honestly depends on the day. I have a different day for different business and different task stuff. So if it's a good day, obviously, and I'm in it, I love it and excited then. So I don't know, kind of a chameleon. I much enjoy and throw my passion into whatever I'm doing at that moment. And I think that when you have something like that, people often ask me, how do you do all these things? Well, first of all, everything you listed, I don't do all the things. This is like 17, 18 years in the making, right? But also that when I'm able to just facilitate between the different things and enjoy them all, it's because I've reduced or gotten rid of pain points or things that I don't enjoy. And that it hasn't been a straight trajectory from the beginning. I think it's really easy for us, and especially me, to sit here and say to y'all listening, oh yeah, pick your passion. You'll never work another day in your life. That's not true. You will enjoy it most of the time, but you're going to have to go through some either projects or industries or different types of products or services to really find what you enjoy. And I kind of do miss those days. Those days are really fun, even though you look back and there were failures and disappointments, etc. It's kind of really fun trying to, get your foothold of what you want to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think we can't underestimate the fact that there's not this magic bullet that, hard work is hard work. You've got to put in that commitment on a daily basis to get the kind of results, the growth, the scaling that you want. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is about some of the biggest challenges that you've seen in this online space as you're dealing with either your own businesses that you're running, or people are coming to you and going, Rachel, I'm really struggling with this. What are some of the top things people struggle with? And if you had advice for those things, what would you say?
I think three major things. One is trying to decide what you want to do. We kind of just touched on that. It's going to be trial and error. You lean into your strengths, you move away from your weaknesses if you can, and kind of, hone in on and give it some time to see. Embrace the pivot, and that's the thing. Businesses constantly evolve and change. Look at any major corporations. Maybe you don't want to be a major corporation, but I use them as examples and I look to see, because they're the ones that have spent millions and billions of dollars making mistakes and changes. So there's something to learn from there. But two, one big takeaway you can also take from looking at others is trying not to be everything to everyone. So like when I first got into doing like business coaching or even legal stuff, it was like, okay, I want to service everyone, because if I cast a wide net, then I can get everyone. You'll be known for nothing then. And you really want to facilitate or to get yourself into a point, whether it's a product or service, no matter industry that you're in, that when someone says, I want X or I need X, you are Y. You are the answer that's going to be responded to. And the only way to do that is to come out of the market very, very narrowly niched. Apple did this. Many different businesses have done this. They come out with one really strong product and they hone in on that, and then you expand out. Oh man, what was the third one I was going to say? I should have said it at the top so you could remind me. Oh man, I don't know. We'll go with those two for now. I can't remember what the third was going to be. Man, I don't remember. Sorry.
No, but that, that alone, talking about this notion of being all things to all people, I feel like that is a constant struggle, because as you acquire more knowledge and experience, that's something you bump up against. Oh, well, wait a minute. Right. What about this? And what about that? And how about this? And it is a bit of a battle that you fight, whether you're small or big, in terms of being as effective as you can be.
Oh, for sure. And the other thing too with that is I feel like if you have the spirit of entrepreneurship, you're going to be multi-passionate. So you're going to be excited about different things. For me, it's reining myself in. For example, I know enough on creating websites. I do all my own websites. So could I go and do it as a business? Sure. But the limiter is that I already have well-established businesses. So I just have to recognize not to add on another thing. And do I really want to commit the time to improving those skills? They're good enough for me, they're good enough to get me where I want to go, but are they good enough to serve the market? And is it worth the time and effort away from proven businesses, from family, from self stuff in order to go that direction? And actually, as you were talking and just now, I thought about what my third thing is. I can't impress enough, no matter what business you're in, where you're at in business, or maybe you're just thinking about it. Simplicity is so key. Simplistic, and if one of the books that's trending right now is Atomic Habits. And in like the first or second chapter, he talks about you only need to improve 1% every day, and it's a compounding effect. So, you look at those that are long-term, sustaining profitably and successfully in different businesses. They are very consistent in the simple things. And I think it's really easy now, on top of trying to offer all the things to everyone, but doing all the things and being on all, like, let's take example, social media, being on all the platforms. And I raise my hand, my team's probably going to heckle me for this because I am one is like, we got to be on all the platforms. And they're like, take your own advice. You got to get, just very consistent and drill down in, nurture where you're trying to grow, as opposed to just throwing seeds onto all the different platforms and just kind of haphazard. You're not going to grow anything. You're not nurturing the seeds at that point. And I feel like in this day and age where there's Instagram and Clubhouse, and I don't even know what else, TikTok, it's easy for us to get distracted. But if you look at the most successful businesses, they go back to the basics of who are you going to serve? How are you going to serve them? And where are those people so you can serve them?
Mm-hmm. And it is the best few, right? Because a lot of times there's this, oh, well, if I have hundreds of thousands of followers, that doesn't mean that they're consumers of what your product or your service is, right? And so that doesn't make any sense for putting money in your pocket if what you're trying to do is actually get paying clients, customers, things like that. So being focused on the right things, I think do matter.
And I can give a real life numbers example on that, right? Is as the social media platforms change, you're effectively starting over every time you're trying to grow it. So having someone come on to, let's say, your TikTok. I just got back on TikTok last week. It's a whole thing. And I only have like 82 followers. So if you landed on that, you would go, only 82 followers? Yeah, but I have 50,000 on Facebook. But you also don't know my email list has over 250,000. So, you can't always go by just what you see. Yes, it is good to have. I think it was pre-show we talked about like accolades, credibility, follower count can be helpful. But more importantly is really, really looking at where you're going to nurture and grow your people. We were just doing internally with the team some evaluations of our key performance indicators from last year. We were going to do it in January, but COVID and we've just had personal stuff going on. We didn't have power for a week because we had that big snowstorm. So we're just now getting around to evaluating like our fall promos, our winter promos. And we took a real big risk this year and said, let's cut our ads budget by like 80% and see what happens. And we could have cut it 100%. Because the majority of our revenue came from our email list that you don't ever see. You don't know those numbers if I hadn't shared it here. So anyways, I share that number with you to know, don't land. And I have clients that do influencer stuff. Yes, they need those numbers in order to get and garner sponsorships, if they're in an influencer situation. But when they try to sell their own specific products, you just said it, Coach Des, those people are not necessarily consumers. They're not consuming what their what that influencer is trying to sell. So just be mindful when we're looking at these metrics. Utilize them as kind of a peripheral guide, but not like your main. And I'm speaking to myself mostly here because I get swept up in the whole idea of, oh my God, I got to have 1 million on TikTok. But that's 1 million on TikTok is not going to produce the results that the email, list that I've been growing for how long does. And I serve better there.
You may brush up on your dance skills. There may be some other things that you accelerate in. It might not be in the revenue area, but maybe some other self-development, parts of what we're trying to accomplish.
My kids will die.
Like, Mom, please stop trying to do that dance. No. Stop. I feel like there's so many, being trendy
Yeah.
is a thing that entrepreneurs deal with. Whether you're starting out or you're a seasoned person, I do think that everyone gets introduced to the next thing and ask themselves that question. Oh my gosh, do I have to learn this too? Is this the next thing? I remember that happened when Clubhouse came out,
Yeah. Is
right?
Clubhouse still around?
Yeah, I still get all these notifications of people, they're so and so starting a room. Do you want to join this room? And but it's that strike while the iron is hot thing, because at that time it was big. There were people who, overnight, it seemed like, got 10,000, 15,000 followers, because every day they were capitalizing on the opportunity to speak in a different venue. It
Yeah.
was kind of a hype thing. Now I think it's stabilized. I don't know that the hype is as big, but certainly people still use it for the
Mhm.
platform that it is. But for today's Clubhouse or TikTok is tomorrow's thing that we haven't even heard of yet,
Right.
right? There's
Right.
always going to be things that are
Mhm.
coming into the market and used as a potential platform for you to do different things with.
And
One of the
and we're not saying, Coach Des and I are not trying to tell you guys, don't go and build that, right? You
right.
have to figure out the formula and what works for you. For me, I mean, even I think it was yesterday, I was reading the article about how Facebook is threatening to pull, Meta is threatening to pull Facebook and
Meta.
Instagram from Europe. Over data privacy practices, which I called this years ago, but I should be a betting woman. No, I'm kidding.
I
But
am in Las Vegas. People do that a lot.
hey, I'm going to be there in a couple weeks. We'll talk about that after. But
Yeah.
seriously though, think about those that have built their business, and what I'm trying to get to is you want to build your house on land that you own, in essence, right? So you're just renting this real estate on Instagram and TikTok and all of that. So you can't, yes, go for the million followers, but you have to have a plan of how are you going to get those followers, because it could be gone tomorrow, but how are you going to keep in contact with them after? How can you effectively serve them, which
Mhm.
turns into selling later, but how do you effectively serve them? Because what's going to happen to fitness influencers and fitness accounts that are in Europe if this gets shut down? They won't have ads. They won't have their accounts. I don't know if it'll actually happen. We'll see what's going to come down the pipeline, but it's a very real possibility. There's clients that have reached out, or potential clients who are like, oh my God, what do I do? And I'm like, well, how's your email list? Have you created on another platform? Like, you've got to have these touch points and a backup plan, because
Yeah.
Zuckerberg could take it away tomorrow. It could be gone.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, is your strategic outlook.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look strategically out into the future to know where you need to capitalize on other things and not feel like a one-trick pony
Yeah.
vibe going on?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that you do that I love, and I would love for you to share more about how you do this, is a mastermind. So the concept of a mastermind goes back as far as Napoleon Hill, and that's why it's called people coming together with like minds to do more innovative things.
Mm-hmm.
The more you congregate in community where you can have a spirit of innovation
Mm-hmm.
and entrepreneurship and other things that are in that realm, the likelihood of your success and accountability is greater, because sometimes we're our own worst enemy. We say to ourselves, oh, we're going to get that done by Friday at 5 p.m. Well, it's now Wednesday of the following week, and that hasn't happened,
Mm-hmm.
because it's easy for you to let yourself down. But when you're talking to a team, and when you've
Yeah.
announced your goals, and when you've set your targets, and you've done all this stuff, now people are holding you accountable to the things that you
Right.
said you've committed to. So that's just my really maybe elementary description of kind of the concept of a mastermind. But since you run one and you've seen the successes of it, I'd love for you to share your perspective.
So I will first share a little bit of a confessional here. I wish, so masterminds are, you define it in a way that I also define it, right? And everyone's kind of using this term to apply to group coaching and this and that. So you really have to, if you see the term mastermind used and you want to invest in yourself that way, you need to look to see what it really includes. Like, is it just like a passive membership? Is it group coaching? Is it, what does it look like, more like what you just talked about? Now, my confession is I wish that masterminds and this group coaching type stuff had been available for me. And I wish I had invested in it years ago. I'm sure it was out there. I didn't even know what it was though, right? Like it, again, glittery MySpace page and music. I had no concept of what any of this sort of stuff was. Didn't really know anybody that was an entrepreneur. So I didn't have a mentor. I didn't really have accountability, and nobody else in like my sphere of influence at the time was even doing online business. So for me, I was really trying to figure it out on my own. Do I think that, I mean, I've had decent success. Obviously, I'm sitting here, and that definition changes with as the wind blows sometimes, life changes. But do I feel like my journey could have been probably a quicker trajectory in some areas? Probably, if I had had a mastermind, the accountability, being held to integrity and things like that. So one thing is that I offer, and it's kind of a mentorship meets mastermind. So I don't just throw people into a group and I'm like, here, be accountability partners, figure it out. I'm still there integrated as the mentor. And so but I like using the mastermind phrase for the exact definition that you gave, because it is mastering of the minds. It's a meeting of the minds. It's a growing of the minds together, which I think is so incredibly important. And we're not actually getting in this barrage of information these days. Podcasts are great. I have a podcast. You mentioned it. This is a great podcast. You get great information. But those of you listening, you may have had questions about some things that Coach Des and I may have said so far, but you're not able to interface and respond with us. By the time that this podcast is over, you may have noted it down. You may try to reach out and talk about it with one of us or someone else. More than likely, the majority of people consuming the content through a podcast are going to hear it, go on their merry way, and not really act on anything that they heard about in here, mostly because there's that disconnect. There's not this back and forth. And so for me, that is one of the things that when I was able to find like-minded individuals in the industries that I was in, that I could ping things off of, that's where I saw the real value. I wasn't in a formal mastermind. We kind of did an informal one. So I say all that to say, that's what I tried to have in my groups. And I do them very niche specific. So I have one for lawyers, one for photographers, another for like online business entrepreneurs. And because it's really important to be with those that are also in your industry. They're not your competitors. In fact, we can't serve everyone. There's enough of the pie for everyone. And you will learn. I think there's something to be said about learning from other industries, but when it comes to the real pain points of what your overlapping avatars and consumers are going through, there's such great value in having people come to the table in the exact definition that you gave of a mastermind. And so that's really what I'm trying to facilitate, trying to really create what I wish I would have had way back in the beginning.
I think it's amazing. I really do. I think that, I personally have been in the same mastermind for the last 2 years. And and there's all kinds of different formats, by the way, for anybody listening. There isn't one sort of universal thing. You could talk to 20 different people at this moment and they could tell you 20 different ways that this can be, so conceptually we've discussed it here, but in practice, this can show up in so many different ways. So masterminds can have an end date, right? So you say, hey, I'm a photographer, I'm a lawyer, I'm an online business owner. This is something that's going to help me to accelerate. I'm committed to this for 6 months or a year. Mm-hmm. And you get that information, you get these great best practices and habits, and then you can move on. And then there's like the kind of group that I'm in, it's a choice as an entrepreneur that you can continue on, which I've chosen to do. It's been over 2 years, and it's interestingly enough, most of the people are consistent. Mm-hmm. Every now and then somebody leaves, somebody new comes, and then you get that new energy. But it is interesting because I meet every week, so I happen to have mine this morning at 5:30 a.m. But it is a level set each time of, okay, yes, strategy, goals, whatever the focus is that we're all working on, because let's face it, life is busy. There's distraction. Things get crazy. You get off kilter. Your list of 10 things is still 8 things at the end of the week. And you're like, okay, I guess I only did do 2 of those things. So I think just the commitment that you make to yourself over and over again to show up and say, okay, I am committed to being an excellent attorney. by
And I
being
think
around
even
that.
if you, well, yeah, but I think even if you define yourself as a committed individual, like I feel like I'm pretty self-ambitious, but there's just something psychological to it. There's just something that makes you want to even go the extra mile. And I'm not saying to the extent of beating yourself up about not getting your list done. Accountability, yes, but give grace, to yourself as well. But there is just, even I am so type A, I am so self-driven, but I just cannot underestimate, or cannot impress enough how important exactly what you just described is at any level of business, any level at all. And maybe even more so as you get further on down the line, because as you're further in business, the more money you make, the longer you've been around, those that started out with you may have fallen off. There is ebbs and flows in business. People pivot and change. And so you may be looking for new peers. And I think the best continuity of having peers is through the format of a mastermind.
Yeah. I think it's awesome. So point being, if you're listening to this and it's, and it's not a thing to say, everybody has to go and do this and all of a sudden, rainbows and unicorns will just start
No.
falling out everywhere. It's more to say, for some people, maybe it's something formal like a mastermind, maybe it's something a little bit less formal for you and you kind of even curate something yourself. I think that the point more so is to channel and harness that energy, because when your focus goes there, that is how the momentum builds when you're talking about building something, growing something, scaling something that matters to you, like your small or your big business. So I do want to ask you about the legal part of businesses. So, and it's not to say we're going to start using a bunch of words nobody understands, but I would say in its most basic form, I don't know that setting up everything with as far as a business online, I don't know, for me that's not the first thing that I think of like,
Most
oh, how do we make sure that this is, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and the legality. I mean, what is the importance and what are the kinds of things that people need to think about from a legal perspective when they're starting their business?
I mean, the lawyer answer is that you should do all the legal things from the very beginning. And it's true. I mean, you want to try to protect yourself, limit liability, make sure you're marketing properly, and owning your brand. Those are like the key 3 phases that I can walk through. But the real world answer is many times you just don't know if you're going to make it, right? And let's be real, legal's not that fun. It's much sexier and funner to get on TikTok and start learning to dance and hashtag research and creating the website and branding and all that stuff. So I get it. Like, you may not want to invest up front. That is going to depend on your comfort level and your life circumstance. Like, do you have a lot of personal assets? Are you willing to put yourself out there? And, there's some online businesses that have less liability than others. There's online fitness coaches that I work with who are very directly by Zoom teaching people how to lift weights. I'm like, okay, that's pretty. We got some liability. We've got more liability here than maybe if I sold you an ebook that talked about the 20 top flowers in America or something like that. I don't know. So I have no idea. There is a business for everything. That's the one thing that I've definitely learned. I thought that before a pandemic. I thought about this earlier when we were talking about, it's incredible the things that we've seen come out during pandemic in the online sphere and what people are, niching into. And it's incredible. It's so exciting. But really, no matter what, where you're at, I think it's so important that once you kind of get your feet under you a bit, if you're not willing to do the legal stuff up front, make it as soon as possible to at least get into the first phase of liability protection. So looking at having your entity, insurance, and proper contracts and terms in place, that is baseline where I always start with clients, just to make sure that you have that, because you want to help to protect yourself. The next phase is also like marketing legalities, right? Maybe you have affiliate links in your podcast description, having the proper disclaimer, stuff like that, to make sure that you're abiding by all marketing laws required. And then, of course, brand protection or ownership, intellectual property. So you want to protect your business name, your podcast name, your program name, your logo, and any of your visual assets of marketing, whether it's YouTube videos, your Instagram photos, that sort of stuff. So those are the key 3 phases. And I kind of go in that order because that's just what seems to make the most sense, and also priority order to many entrepreneurs, no matter what industry that you're in. But I get it. Again, lawyer answer, do it all up front, try to get as protected as possible. But the real world is just work incrementally as quick as you can, reinvesting in yourself through those 3 phases.
Yeah, I'm glad that you gave the really honest answer for that, because as I've approached going to different conferences and meeting people that are starting, their own businesses, it feels very overwhelming when when all the questions that come up front. Should I trademark this? How do I do that? Where do I go for that?
Yeah.
How do I mean, all of these things, like to your point of feeling like there is 100 steps to take, and it seems so far for you to see the top of that staircase
Get that.
that it almost feels debilitating.
I think
So,
we feel that way with a lot of areas of business. I know this week when I was working on stuff, I was like, oh my God, I'm almost 20 years into business. And why do I feel so overwhelmed? And so for me, it's really just taking a step back and going, well, we can't tackle all of it today. The whole adage of like, eat the elephant one bite at a time. And so
mhm.
that's a reason why a lot of my businesses and resources exist, is because you don't know what you don't know. I've been there as an entrepreneur. I've been there on the lawyer side of things. I do have a whole free legal checklist on my website for this that works for pretty much any industry, at least as a guide. But, I don't sit here in my ivory tower and go, oh my God, you haven't done X, Y, and Z. I'm just like, okay, let's triage whatever's going on here. Then let's figure out what we can do next. But it's all within the confines of your life circumstances. You may not have the $10,000 or however much it would cost to do all the things. And I'm not really one of those people or business coaches that's like, go get in debt, do this, do that. I'm going to advise you of the risk of you waiting to do things, but there's personal responsibility, right? Like I'll
Yeah.
provide the steps that I think you should do in my recommendation, but you have to make the plan to do it. And then just ask questions. Like there's so many experts like me and in other fields too, financial planning, that kind of stuff, like makes my head like spin,
Mm.
that I look to the experts for. And I think that's where we can lean in and support other businesses that helps for us not to feel so overwhelmed, like you mentioned.
Yeah. One question at a time.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's true. And you're not going to know everything, and your business is going to grow and change. So everything needs to be fluid. And I know I love business. I love all the business things. And so but even still on like admin days, the first of the month is like all the yucky admin stuff, taxes, finances, all of that. It's a necessary evil. But I think if you commit to doing that stuff, so maybe it's like asking the questions, shooting an email to your lawyer at the first of the month, by just going through the operation of evaluating your business, like your KPIs, your contracts, or whatever else is going on, you're going to elevate yourself and you're going to grow as a business owner. And you're almost on like a self-continuing education. Even if you feel frustrated, overwhelmed, just the process of committing to the accountability of doing those sort of tasks routinely and evaluations or asking questions, like you said, maybe don't ask 500 questions at once. Just tackle a couple of questions every month. We said this earlier, it's the simple, consistent steps. It's not these quick hacks of getting on TikTok and all of that. It's the simple, consistent steps with accountability that really grows the best entrepreneurs that I've ever met.
I love that. I mean, and I'm totally with you. The people that I've seen have longevity, and when they're talking about what they've done or their success, they're not talking about, oh, so 4 minutes ago, all of this happened, or even
Yeah.
3 months or 3 years. This took over a decade. It took 2 decades. I mean, there's the grit, there's the hard work, there's the research, there's the right people that you get around you, but it does take time.
Yeah.
It does take time to learn and to grow. But if you have the mindset that you're willing to learn every day,
Mm-hmm.
you can persevere in
Mm-hmm.
business. And I think, especially because today we're talking about the online space, the resources are abundant, really. I
Almost
mean,
paralyzing.
yeah, almost to the point where there's so much information, because there's ebooks and because there's free resources and there's podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
just dedicated to starting your business or whatever it is. I mean, you can turn to just about a dozen, places right now, and not know which one to choose to get started.
Yeah.
But, on looking at the glass half full version of what I just said, the information is out there to get
Yeah.
started.
Well, and it's going to depend on where you are in business. It's so funny. The other night I found myself saying, "Oh, I just want it all done for me. Not that I physically want it done, but I want to just be told what to do on whatever it was." And like I would pay good money to not have to do all the research. All the free resources are out there. I could cobble it together. I am a smart enough individual to figure it out, but I didn't really want to take the hours to figure it out and the frustration to figure it out. Now, when I first started my businesses, I didn't have the luxury of cash. Plus, there were not a lot of resources, but I didn't have the luxury of cash to get into mastermind, to get into courses. So I was cobbling together what I could. So I get that. If you're in that financial position, good. But there will get a point that you kind of need to look around and say, is this worth my time to try to sit here and cobble together my whole email strategy by scrolling through Apple Podcasts for 6 hours? Or would you rather go to a source, being mindful, there's some good courses out there, not so good courses, but go to a source that's doing what you like, what they're doing, you connect with them and you like the results. That is where I think you lean into it. And it's hard. I get it. It's so easy. Even now, how many years in, I get distracted. I'm like, I want to do this, or I'm going to try that. And I do think you test things, but it's really getting focused on what I want to learn. So is it something I'm willing to invest the time in figuring it out myself, or is it worth throwing some money investment? If you can, right? If you can, I don't believe really going into big debt for that kind of stuff. But if you can, there comes a point where it's just easier and cheaper. Those hours that I could spend cobbling it together, I could have been earning the money that would have paid for the course or the mentorship that I would have bought into.
Yeah. There's always a cost benefit analysis, right? Every time you're making a decision about any investment into your business,
Yeah.
whether it's a course, whether it's a coach, because there are all of these different resources and levels of commitment, either your time or money, because that's pretty much what we're talking about. Everything is time or money,
For sure.
right? You're doing that assessment, but you'll get better and better at it
Yeah.
as time goes on. Right. You'll have a little bit more confidence. You're going to be able to use and your gut instincts. They really do mean something.
Mm-hmm.
Analysis paralysis kills us, I think, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And you're smart. You can figure
Yeah.
out, these things. But I want to make sure that I spend some time asking you a couple questions for people to get to know you a little bit better.
I'm scared.
Well, when I started this podcast, and I don't know if you feel the same way, it's one of those things where you go on a journey and you have an idea, right, about where it's going to go, but things just unfold and it becomes so much more. But one of the truths that I've wanted to be a foundation of this is the auspice of why it started, which is called Born Unbreakable, because I believe that we go through many things and there's points where we feel like we're going to break, but we don't. So my question for you is, what has made you feel like you're unbreakable as you reflect on the different challenges that you've worked through?
Cancer's not the answer. You probably expected that to be it. The year that I did Ironman World Championships, I came out of that and had developed a chronic illness. We don't really have a specific diagnosis, but it's a lot of the symptoms of like chronic fatigue syndrome and adrenal fatigue. Ooh, sorry, that was my ring light. And it's just been battling to come back from that. And I just think, a lot of the things we talked about today of like consistency and focus and getting like the necessary things done and giving grace for the other things that you don't get done. I really had to learn a lot of that when I was almost bedridden. I mean, I went from Ironman World Championships to being almost bedridden for a year, all these different like investigative surgeries and testing and such.
Mm-hmm.
And just coming out the other side of that, I'm not 100%, but that makes me feel unbreakable and shows me, we, at the very beginning of this episode, we talked about, how do you have the confidence to do things? And my answer was sometimes you just have to do it. You don't have a choice. And I think the same thing here is that I may not have had a choice, but I did. I could have just given up and let my businesses fall to the wayside from being sick. And I got strategic. I leaned into my team. I built up more of a team so that I could remove me a bit more. Took time off from mentorship and coaching for that time because I wasn't going to be able to effectively serve. And so I think I just feel unbreakable from coming out from that undiagnosed chronic illness and still being able to, change with it. And which is very difficult as a type A who wants to constantly go and achieve this and achieve that, to being almost bedridden and barely being able to work on my business and be around my family. That took a lot. But the fact that I'm sitting here and I'm getting back, I feel unbreakable from that.
Oh, that is incredible, Rachel. Really. What is something that is on your bucket list?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm actually kind of working on it right now, getting my private pilot's license. It is terrifying.
That sounds terrifying.
It is, but it's much like business. So I did I had offhandedly sent it to my husband about, it's a bucket list item. Like when I was sick, I thought I was dying. Like I created a whole bucket list. I thought I got to do this. And that was one of the things. So he got me a exploratory type flight for my birthday. So I went and I was sweating bullets, girl, the whole time. I'm like white knuckling. And the pilot's like, well, do you want to fly it? And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe in a minute, I probably said it about 40 times. And finally he was like, well, we're going to land in like 10. And I said to myself, Rachel, this is like business. You have to grow up here and hang on, get going if you're going to do this, or else what are you going to regret more? Being scared out of your freaking mind when you grab on and try to steer this plane with the risk of falling out of the sky? Or are you going to regret when you feel the wheels hit the ground and you never took control? So I did it. I'm still scared. My palms are sweating thinking about it now. But yeah. I just think it's a great metaphor for business.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That is one of the coolest bucket list items. That is incredible. I can't imagine the adrenaline. Mm-hmm. And I do love the analogy. Just, the learning that you're going through with something like that and being able to apply it to different parts of your life, like business, is amazing. Okay, what is a self-limiting belief that you've had to overcome?
It's funny you ask this because this is something I've been working on really recently. It probably has some to do with like behavioral patterns growing up, patterns I was taught. Maybe taking cost benefit analysis to the extreme. I don't really know how to describe what I'm meaning. More of like, it's so much easier for me to look at the negative than the actual potential positive that could come out of it, which you would think with everything we talked about, I wouldn't have that. But I second guessed myself quite a bit because I had someone in my life growing up that was very, very negative about everything. We never really looked for the positive. So I feel like that attachment of that sort of pattern behavior is what creeps into all sorts of beliefs in my business.
Yeah, I think people can relate to a lot of our limitations or perceived, limitations, not actual, because we're very capable to do everything that we want to do, comes from growing up. Experiences, whether it's an individual, more than one individual, school, just different things that have happened experientially that tell you all of a sudden, no, can't do that.
And it's a work in progress, I shared earlier a bit about like in the beginning that online business really wasn't a thing for us smaller people, only for major corporations. And so I was questioned in many areas. Oh, is this going to work? This isn't going to work. Go get a job. I find myself in that pattern even now. And I'll have to go, hold on a second. I've been doing this for 17 years. Like I have the receipts, the physical receipts. So it's just something you work with, and it's a muscle you have to exercise. Some people can do it on their own. Some need therapy. I am a big champion in that we all need a therapist. We all need somebody. And but just know that if you're someone that's struggling with self-limiting beliefs, you probably had some of them pop up while we were talking through this episode. Write them down and work with them incrementally. I think that's for me. I approach that sort of stuff the same way with business. I'm like, okay, we got to fix this because this pattern ain't going away and it's going to do nothing but hurt me. So what do we got to do? And you said it earlier, coming into it with business with like a beginner's mind, a learning mind, being coachable, go into it being coachable or teachable with these limiting beliefs. To me, it's the only way. Exercising and being open to changing it are going to be the way that you can get over it.
Absolutely.
And be mindful when it pops back up.
Well, then it's a recognition of it. If you run away from it, you're not actually addressing it, and therefore it will continue to show up. If you address it, you can manage whatever that challenge is. It's not to say it just goes away completely and all of a sudden you're now not dealing with that issue or that challenge, but you now are equipped with the tools of how to work through that in a more productive manner. So I
And
think
you've got to get the tools because your brain is the craziest thing. I had a situation of something I was dealing with emotionally, and I hadn't thought about the trauma for so long. Then I dove in. It was this last July. I was doing an Ironman, and I dove in to swim. And all of a sudden, I could see the trauma and feel it. And I was like, what the heck, man? Like I thought I was on the other side of this, and talked to my therapist. He goes, well, your brain recognized the pattern. And I realized, because you start Ironmans by swimming, I recognized that the heightened state of my breathing and my heart rate in the swimming pattern, I had done the same when I was first trying to overcome the trauma in training. So my body, how many years removed, triggered to it because I had the tools, though. I was able to be like, all right, of course, in my mind, I don't know if we have an explicit rating on this, but I was like, not today, B, we're not doing this today. But it's like,
you can freely say what you want here on the show.
oh, we ain't doing this today, bitch. Get the fuck out of here. We ain't doing this today. But if I hadn't had the tools, I would have had to turn right back around and go back to shore. I wouldn't have been able to do the race. And so I think that's kind of if you're going through something like that, just know, even when you're on the other side of it, or you think you've run from it, you got to have the tools, because our brains are so weird of how things pop back up.
Crazy town. They do. It's ridiculous. Okay, so we talked about self-limiting belief. Sometimes that's, takes us back to places. What about superpower? On the opposite end of that, what is one of your superpowers?
Oh man, I'm actually glad you asked this question. I think it's, and we talked about this pre-show, I think it's being able to have a whole bunch of moving parts going on at one time, but it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you just got to make sure that you don't have so many moving parts. And, one of the things that, you didn't ask this, but one of the things that I've learned in business, especially if you have a team, is, I love the test Clifton Strengths Assessment. And so when I hear superpower, I think of that. Have you done it? Okay. For those that haven't, I don't know if you've talked about it on the show. I love it. I don't love it just for the superpowers it shows me that I have. I love that it shows me the blind spots that come out of those superpowers, because like mine, I think, I tell you my superpower is moving quickly and all these moving parts. I have team members that they get the blind spot of that. And so I have to know how to rein my superpower in when I'm effectively communicating or delegating to certain team members. And that's not a degradation on them. They're just different people than me. And so, Clifton Strengths was so revealing. It was a kick in the gut, but it was so revealing.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage anybody who is listening, if you pick up the book, Now Discover Your Strengths. There's a Strengths Finder 2.0. Very, very affordable if you're looking for, cost-effective ways to work on the things that you're in your genius zone, recognize the things that are on the other side of that as well. A little bit of the kryptonite side of the superpower there, because we all have the ability to hone what we're good at, but also, like you said, the double-edged sword, to be able to manage the other pointy side of that sword, right?
Yeah.
Rachel, if there was one last piece of advice that you could give to anyone listening right now, what would it be?
Earlier we talked about, seasons of life changing, just being vigilant of that. But I think within that, even more so, recognize that everything, business and life, but especially business, is just a decision. It's not the decision. You are the pilot of this plane. You can change direction at any time that you want. You can go up, you can go down, you can go to Miami, you can go to New York City, or go out to Vegas and visit Coach Des. I think there's so much freedom in recognizing, because I'm one of those that I'm we got to make the decision and move on it because I want to get the best bang for my buck of my time, money, and energy. but it's so freeing. And my team has to remind me of this sometimes too, of it's just a decision. Let's test it out and see what the heck happens, and then we can change it. There's so much freedom in knowing that you can, we touched on pivoting a little bit, but adjusting, just a decision and make the adjustments you need to. And I know that that's very difficult. We talked about why I got into business so quickly earlier was the financial dependency, the need for it. I know that's very difficult. If you're someone who's watching or listening and it's like, oh my gosh, my family's dependent, I got to make the decision. The decision is not necessarily going to make you any more money or success quicker or easier than a decision. In fact, you're going to be so tunnel vision that you might end up actually restricting yourself from growth. So, look at every decision as a decision that can be changed, not the decision that can't ever be changed.
That's brilliant. When I was meeting with my team this week, one of my teams that I lead, I was talking about us getting together and really walking through and reestablishing some guiding principles. Mm-hmm. One of them that I picked up on is agility. I would love that to be a bit more at the forefront of giving ourselves the grace, the permission. I love those words that you used, to be able to have that agile. Well, this made sense 4 months ago.
Right.
Doesn't make that much sense now, or the responsiveness that we thought we were going to get, or, whatever the case may be, is that the agility to say, okay, we're going to course correct. We're going to make an adjustment. We're going to do something a little bit differently. I just think, sometimes we have to get back in touch with ourselves and figure out the changes that need to be made. And there's a lot of value in that, and not feeling bad because a decision that made sense at a time seems to maybe not make sense anymore.
I think it's easy for entrepreneurs, especially individuals with my personality type, to be like, this is the business plan and we got to do it no matter what's happening. And I feel like with pandemic, especially, 2020, really should have been a lesson for many people of you've got to lift your head up and look around and see if life circumstances have changed. I just did a keynote on this a couple months ago for a local organization, but I can think of like 5 major friction points in life and business. They all corresponded where I wasn't effectively serving others, myself, or my family. And it was because things in my life had changed, but I was so rigid in my work in that Mac. Let's take, for example, I have 5 kids. So when everything shut down, in 2020, all of a sudden I'm virtual teaching to 5 kids. Oh my God. And I had to scale back my work hours, and I just had to, or I had to adjust them to do the work in the evening. And so it's, that's just a really simplistic example, but recognize that you're going to have seasons of life. The circumstances are going to change. And so you cannot be so rigid. Like, I'm all about processes. I'm all about this, that, the other thing. We follow everything to a T, and when I walk this through with my team, myself, my family, and my clients, back to what I mentioned before, create your real business to live your real life. What does your real life look like right now in this season of life? Because we might need to adjust how we approach or what we're going to achieve, or a decision that we're going to make in business in order to meet that. Because you're going to have friction points, and you're going to find that you have less trajectory, less happiness, less return, less service. If you're not just picking your head up, looking around and seeing has life changed at all, you need to adjust business specifically, what you're going to do. And I know that sounds so simplistic, but so interesting. I'm one of them too. I'm a slow learner, obviously, because I can think of 5 major points in like the last years. But I see it with clients all the time. If they're feeling burnt out, that's one of the very first places that we start. Is this a long-term burnout because maybe you got into this and you're just not cut out for business? And that's completely okay. Not everyone is. Or is this just a short-term burnout that we can course correct, like you said, and work with the season that we're in? It's often that's often the situation. Sometimes you just need someone on the outside to tell you that, especially hard heads like me.
No, I think you're so right, but I so appreciate that insight. Rachel, how can people connect with you? How do they follow you? How can they get in touch with you? There's something that you could have said today that piqued their interest, whether it's, coaching, whether it's online business questions, whether it's Legal, I don't even know where to start. I can't even. Like, this is way
Well,
too much.
the thing with the legal stuff, and then I'll give you guys my URL stuff, but the thing with legal is like you're not going to see a direct return. And so I think that's why not only is it foreign, it's hard to want to invest in it, because it's not like you go spend money on marketing and all of a sudden you get clients. You don't see the things that you prevented by having contracts and, communication and all that. But yeah, so rachelbrenke.com, that is kind of the mothership. You can find all my business stuff there, the mentorship, mastermind stuff, as well as, most importantly, probably the free legal checklist, or else you can just hit me up on Instagram or Facebook. Those are my big social media. TikTok, maybe. We'll see how long I stick around with that one. We'll see.
That is fantastic. I mean, I'm so grateful because I know I've learned from this conversation. I hope anybody who's joined learned a thing or two. I mean, that's really the goal of doing this is being able to come together in a space where we can talk openly and vulnerably, and hope that you walk away and take a little nugget, take the things that mean something to you. It's kind of like a buffet, go to the section where you get a little bit of that extra helping, and hopefully that's right. Yeah, exactly. Mashed potatoes. What happened? Ice cream? Where are we? What's happening here? And that's really the goal. So hopefully this was really helpful. I know it was eye opening and such a worthwhile investment of time here with you today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to chit chat.
Awesome. Rachel Brenke, a world full of knowledge with her experience being an entrepreneur and becoming an online guru. And boy, does it benefit for her to know all the legal aspects of what to do when you're starting a business. Something still that I've Googled my way through in full transparency as I've done different entrepreneurial things. I actually want to share something that was off the recording that Rachel and I discussed after the interview. And it's something that I want to leave with you as homework, because you always know, at least for those of you that have been here a time or two, that I say, you are your only limit, so take action today. That is something that I profess at the end of every podcast episode. And we were talking about the concept of mastermind, and she has reached a level where she is at the top of the group that she's in terms of her accomplishments, where she wants to go. And so with that, she's, looking for the next thing, the next group that can captivate her, motivate her, take her to the next level. So this is my challenge for you. I want you to think about what you need right now that is going to take you to the next level. What is a goal that you have to achieve? We're talking about being in February. Okay, there's a big runway between now and the end of the year, but even just think in the next 30 days. In the next 30 to 60 days, where do you want to be? And what action can you take right now to get there? Is it a coach, a group, a book, a course, whatever it is that you feel that you need to do to take you to the next place that you need to be, whether that is just in your life or whether it's in business, take that action. You will find that there are times where you will peak, meaning you have reached or feel that you've reached your fullest potential, where you're at and with the people you've surrounded yourself with, and it's time to graduate. Believe it or not, you may not feel that now, but I'm giving you this lesson ahead of time. When you end elementary school, what happens? You go to middle school or junior high, then you go to high school, then you go to college, and so forth and so on. Business and life is like that. You're going to reach points where you feel like there's a plateau, and you need to go climb that next mountain. Don't be afraid of that. Lean into that and get the right resources or people around you so that you can excel into that potential. So that is my word of the day at the end of this incredible episode. I hope you learned a lot. Follow Rachel. She is a wealth of knowledge, I am telling you right now. And do me a favor. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Share this episode with somebody that you think could benefit from hearing it. Thank you for being here. tune in again next time for another inspiring episode of the Born Unbreakable podcast.